Ancient Pagan Witches, Episode 1, The Roots of the Witch. Between earth, spirit, and flame. In a time before the word witch was feared, before it was spat out by the lips of fearful clergy or inked in blood on parchment by inquisitors, she walked the forests, mountains, and moors, barefoot and cloaked in linen, wool, or nothing at all. The ancient witch was not an outcast yet, but a daughter of the land, a keeper of tradition, mystery, and healing. She was the living bridge between the seen and the unseen. In ancient tribal societies across Europe, the Near East, and beyond, certain individuals were born or made into roles that defied normal boundaries. These were the folk witches, cunning women, seers, and bone whisperers. Though their names were many, their role was one: to serve as the vessel between nature and the human spirit. The witch as Earth's midwife. The ancient witch was often a midwife, both literally and symbolically. She helped bring life into the world, guided the dying to their ancestors, and helped the soul navigate between. She understood the rhythm of birth, menstruation, fertility, disease, aging, and death, not through sterile science, but through observation, herbal craft, and inherited lore. Each birth she attended was blessed by breath and leaf, each death a sacred rite. She learned from her grandmothers, from the trees, from the waters. The moon was her teacher, the stars her parchment. She used mandrake, henbane, mugwort, valerian, and countless other herbs, not only to heal, but also to induce vision, dream, and flight. The fire in the bones, fire was sacred, not just for warmth or cooking, but as a living spirit, an ally that could be fed, praised, or feared. The ancient witch tended the hearth as an altar. Her whispered spells were cast not with dramatic flair, but woven into daily life, in bread kneaded at dawn, in smoke rising from bundled herbs, in oil rubbed on skin, in lullabies sung over the cradle. She burned herbs to send messages. She anointed tools with blood, fat, wine, and ash. She may have kept bones, feathers, and stones that hummed with spirit. In many cultures, witches were also diviners, reading fate in cracked shells, flames, or bird flight, a path of power and secrecy. Ancient witches were not part of organized religion. They did not read from sacred books. Their temple was the cave, the forest clearing, the storm, or a hidden spring. Their spirits were the ancestors, animal guides, or nature spirits. They used ritual, ecstasy, and trance to commune. Because of this independence, witches were often respected, feared, or envied. When times were good, they were sought for healing or guidance. When crops failed or infants died, they could be blamed. Thus, secrecy became essential. The witch's knowledge was passed down womb to womb. Symbols were carved into wood or stone, spells were sung in lullabies or woven into embroidery, and some carried entire worlds of ritual and knowledge in their memory alone. The Witch and the Moon. The moon was the witch's eternal clock. New moons for planting intention, full moons for harvest and power, dark moons for banishment or deep spirit work. She understood the tides of menstrual blood, sea, and spirit. The moon wasn't just a symbol, but a living ally, a guide through the labyrinth of life. Under the moon, she met with others, perhaps 3, 7, or 13. They met in silence, under oaks or inside Barrow Hills, where they would chant, dance, drum, and transform. This was not devil worship, but deep ancestral magic, a reclaiming of feminine power rooted in love for the land and respect for spirit. Ancient Pagan Witches, Episode 2, The Witch Across the Ancient Lands, Her Faces, Names, and Sacred Tools. In the tapestry of ancient lands, the witch did not wear one face, she wore many. Her name shifted with the tongue that spoke her magic moulded by mountain, moor, desert, and sea, but always, always she carried the same fire in her belly, the same knowing in her bones. This is her journey across lands through cultures, where her presence was both feared and revered, her tools both humble and divine.
The vulva.
Seeress of the North. In the cold winds of Scandinavia, she was called Vulva, the staff-bearer. She was no common woman. The vulva was a spirit walker, a seeress of great renown, respected even by kings and warriors. Wrapped in furs, adorned with beads and iron charms, she travelled between settlements to perform seidh, an ecstatic trance magic rooted in song and vision. She sat high upon platforms as she chanted and called forth visions, Drummers surrounded her, women sang to guide her. She would slip into the other world, speak with the dead, and return with prophecy. Her staff was a wand of power, part weapon, part symbol, part beacon. The Norse feared her powers, for they were connected to feminine spirits, fate, word, and the Norns. Some whispered she could shapeshift, others believed she rode the winds.
The pharmakia.
Witch of ancient Greece. In Greece, she was the pharmakis, or pharmacutis, root cutter, potion maker. Her art was both feared and desired. Men came to her for lust potions, rivals accused her of curses, and women sought her help in secret. She knew the sacred and poisonous plants, mandrake, belladonna, hellebore, opium poppy. The pharmakis did not just heal the body, she stirred the soul. Through incantation, ritual bathing, ointments and smoke, she altered perception and invited spirits in. She may have served Hecate, goddess of crossroads and witchcraft, or worked in groves sacred to Artemis and Persephone. Unlike temple priests, the pharmakis walked a liminal line. She was wild, untamed and powerful, feared even by philosophers, and yet her craft was deeply natural. She worked with the land, not against it.
The Kayak and the Bean Facer.
Witches of the Celtic Isles. In Ireland and Scotland, she was Cailleach, the old woman, the veiled one, the storm hag who birthed mountains and ruled winter. But she was also Bean Facer, the wise woman. She lived at the forest's edge, or deep within it. Her house smelled of peat smoke, dried herbs and magic. She read the future in ashes, in stones, in the flight of crows. Her charms were spoken in whispers, her spells tied into rags and hung on sacred trees, a tradition known as clootie magic. She might use an effigy, a poppet, made of root or straw to protect or curse. The Celtic witch worked with the Sid, the Fae, the spirits between worlds. She left offerings at sacred wells and danced under full moons at stone circles older than memory.
The Slavic Vedma, knower of dark and light.
In the Slavic lands, she was Vedma, from the root ved, to know. The Vedma was deeply feared and revered. She could bless your crops or blight them. She rode on the wind, danced with fire, and whispered to the dead. Her patronus? Possibly Baba Yaga, the wild crone of the woods, who lived in a chicken-legged hut and flew in a mortar and pestle. The Vedma used threads, knots, ashes, bones and hair in her workings. She cursed with mirrors and protected with salt. But she was also a midwife, healer and protector of women's mysteries. She guided girls into womanhood, guarded sacred rites of blood and birth, and saw things men feared to see. The peasants came to her, secretly, reverently, when the church had no answers. The witch's sacred tools across the world. Though her culture changed, certain sacred items travelled with her spirit across the earth. Staff or wand, a symbol of will and power, often carved from a sacred tree. Knife or sickle, used for harvesting herbs under moonlight or for protection. Cauldron or bowl, the womb of the goddess for brews, divination or sacred washing. Mirror, to trap or reveal spirits for scrying into past or future. Herbs and roots for medicine, poison, trance and protection. Bones, feathers, stones, spirit carriers and allies of the land. Thread, knots, poppets for binding, releasing, blessing and banishing. Her voice was a tool too, chanting, singing, murmuring spells and charms as old as language itself. In every culture she stood with one foot in the world of the living, one in the realm of spirit. Whether she was feared or followed, she remained connected to nature's wild heart, never to be tamed. By torchlight, under sacred boughs, or within hidden caves, the ancient witches gathered. Not in devilish mockery, as later myths claimed, but in reverence for the earth, for the moon, and for the ecstatic mystery of life itself. To the witch, the body was not shameful, but holy. The spirit was not separated from nature, but born from it. Ritual was not a performance. It was a key, unlocking other realms, deep memories, and the raw, untamed power of being alive. Tonight, we enter the Sabbats, the sacred flight, and the moon-soaked rites that animated the life of the ancient witch.
The moon and her cycles.
Witch's eternal drum. From the black crescent to the silvery full, the moon was the witch's clock, her guide, her witness. She knew each phase held a power. Dark moon, the time of death, endings, banishment, and descent. The witch would enter caves or cover mirrors. This was a time of deep meditation, and waxing moon, a time for growth, spells of attraction, strength and healing. Seeds were planted, physically or spiritually. Full moon, power surged, rituals of vision, spirit flight, sex magic, and manifestation reached their peak. Drums echoed, fires burned high. Waning moon, a time to release, cleanse and purge. The witch might cut cords, bury spells, or bathe in herbs to shed sorrow or illness. Witches tracked their own blood cycles with the moon, often syncing with her naturally. The red tent, or moon lodge, became the inner sanctum, a space for bleeding, visioning, dreaming, and teaching. Sabbats and the Wheel of the Year. The ancient witches lived by nature's rhythm, marked by 8 sacred festivals, known today as the Wheel of the Year. While names varied by culture, the energies were constant. Samhain, Oct 31, Nov 1, the Veil Thins, Spirits Return, Ancestor Rites and Death Magic. Yule, Winter Solstice, the sun is reborn, fires are kindled, a time of prophecy. Imbolc, Feb 1 to 2, the first stirrings of life. Brigid's Flame, Purification, Initiation. Ostara, Spring Equinox, balance, fertility rites, egg and seed magic. Beltane, May 1, Fire and Flesh, Sacred Sexuality, Hand Fastings, Ecstatic Rites. Litha, Summer Solstice, the Sun at Zenith, Herb Harvesting, Peak Manifestation. Lammas, Aug 1, First Harvest, Bread Magic, Offering and Gratitude. Mabon, Autumn Equinox, Balance Returns, Reflection, Protection and Descent. Each Sabbath was celebrated with fire, feast, dancing and ritualized storytelling. These were not quaint seasonal markers. They were portals through which witches engaged directly with cosmic forces.
Flying ointments and the art of spirit travel.
One of the most misunderstood witchcraft practices is the flying, not with broomsticks, but with trance, plants and ecstasy. Witches used ointments infused with psychoactive herbs, belladonna, datura, henbane, mandrake, mixed into rendered animal fat or plant oil. They anointed wrists, thighs, temples and vulva, places where skin is thin, spirit is near. This was done in ritual with chant and intent. Once the ointment took hold, the witch would slip into a visionary state. She would fly, her soul lifting into the other world. There she met spirits, ancestors, gods, or received messages for her people. The broomstick, perhaps symbolic of the stick used to apply ointments to the body. But it was also an extension of her will, her staff of command. In trance, the witch soared across time, space, and self. Trance, dance, and possession. The body was a doorway. Through breathwork, chanting, spinning, drumming, or sex magic, the witch could enter altered states. Her heartbeat would change. Her breath became rhythmic. The edges of the world blurred. In these states, she would speak in other tongues, be possessed by a goddess or ancestor, dance like fire, receive prophecy, heal others through laying of hands or sound. Her rituals were visceral, sensual, and elemental. They often involved nakedness, not for seduction, but to shed society's chains, and return to primal truth. The body as altar, the spell. The witch didn't need temples. Her body was the temple. Her voice, a wand. Each gesture, a spell. She would wash her body in moon water, paint her skin with ash, clay, or herbs, adorn herself with teeth, feathers, bones, braid power into her hair, wear charms over her heart. When she spoke, words had power. Every syllable was chosen like a sacred stone. She didn't pray, she declared. She didn't plead, she conjured. Her spells might be whispered into knots, traced into dirt, sung into smoke, or buried in the roots of a yew tree. Episode 4, The Bone Path. Death magic, shadow work, and the underworld. To the ancient witch, death was not the enemy, nor a thing to dread. Death was a teacher, a guide, an ally. She walked alongside it, not because she was obsessed with darkness, but because she understood that life and death are woven from the same thread. While priests prayed to distant heavens, the witch crouched by graves, listened to the wind in the skull hollows, and whispered the names of her ancestors into the cold earth. She did not fear the underworld, she walked it. The bones know. The sacredness of remains. Bones were never just leftovers of life. They were containers of memory. Ancient witches used bones for divination, casting bones to read fate, protection, hanging bones in doorways or burying them beneath thresholds. Spirit communication, placing bones on altars to summon ancestral voices. Transformation rites, carrying bone fragments to hold a spirit's essence. The witch saw bones as truth made visible. They could not lie. They hummed with stories, especially if they came from elders, sacred animals, or those who died in power. Some witches wore bone jewelry, others kept skulls on altars, some wrote spells on bone shards and threw them into fire to release their will. The underworld journey, Dissenters' initiation. The witch's initiation was not always joyful. It often came in the form of grief, loss, madness, or deep personal death, ego collapse, identity unraveling, trauma. But the ancient witch didn't run from the descent. She embraced it. She journeyed into the dark willingly, like Inanna, the Sumerian goddess who descended through 7 gates to face her shadow self. Or like Persephone, who ate the seeds of transformation and ruled below. In ritual, the witch might symbolically descend, entering a cave or burial mound, covering mirrors and lights, walking blindfolded or bound, sitting in silence for days, fasted, bathed in ash, or anointed with oils of nightshade. She learned to sit with death, to speak its language, to learn from the spirits who dwell in silence. Necromancy, ancestral communion and spirit work. Necromancy in its original form was not dark sorcery, it was ancestral reverence. The ancient witch sought wisdom from the dead, not to dominate them, but to listen. She might sleep on a grave mound to receive dreams, burn copal, myrrh, or juniper to call spirits, pour wine or milk into the earth as an offering, use mirrors or bowls of water as portals, work with ancestor stones, bones or hair relics, build a spirit house, a hidden altar for communication. She knew not all spirits were kind. Some were restless, tricksters, or angry. But the witch was trained to negotiate, protect, and discern. She always cast a circle, called on her spirit allies, and left a path of return. Shadow work, meeting the self beneath the skin. Before she could hold power over others, the ancient witch had to meet herself fully, even the parts shamed, hidden, or feared. In rites of shadow work, she would bury her old clothes, symbolizing the death of an identity, write shameful truths and burn them to ash, sit before a mirror with only candlelight and see what stared back, speak the names of her abusers, her regrets, her rage, not to destroy but to release, dance her grief into the ground, dream walk with spirit guides who held a lantern into her wounds. She knew, only when you befriend your darkness can you truly own your light. Shadow was not evil, it was power unclaimed, waiting to be seen and integrated. Dark goddesses, teachers of the threshold. The ancient witch did not fear dark goddesses. She honoured them. These deities were not evil. They were keepers of sacred change, guardians of the gates, truth-tellers, and wound healers. She may have worked with Hecate, Greek goddess of the crossroads, the torchbearer who lights the way through shadow. Morrigan, Celtic phantom queen, crow goddess of fate, war, and prophecy. Ereshkigal, Sumerian queen of the dead, who stripped Inanna of all she thought she was. Hel, Norse goddess of the underworld, half beautiful, half rotten, both truth, Boyaga, Slavic crone of the forest, who teaches by testing. Santa Muerte, death herself, seen as sacred mother in folk traditions. To work with these goddesses was not easy, but it brought clarity, strength, and rebirth. They stripped away illusion and made the witch honest. Death as fertile ground. In the end, the witch knew, what dies feeds what lives. Every fallen leaf becomes soil. Every pain, if felt fully, becomes wisdom. Every descent gives rise to deeper power. She didn't curse death, she honoured it. She built rituals not just for mourning, but for celebrating the spirit's journey. She sang at funerals, she tended bones, she kept a lantern lit for those who walked between. Ancient Pagan Witches. Episode 5. Familiars, Elementals, and the Witch's Wild Kin. The witch's power was never hers alone. From the rustling trees to the hiss of the fire, from the cry of a raven to the breeze upon her skin, the ancient witch lived in constant communion with the more-than-human world. Her world was not silent. It spoke, whispered, growled, and sang. She was surrounded by allies, and she knew them not by logic or language, but by instinct, dream, and sign. These were her familiars, her elementals, her spirit beasts, and her nature kin, and together they walked the old ways.
Familiars?
Beasts of spirit and shadow, sure. The witch's familiar was not just a pet, it was a spiritual companion, protector, and often a part of her soul. Some familiars were physical animals. A black cat, a toad, an owl, a snake, who lived with the witch, shared her energy, and guarded her space. But many familiars were spirits in animal form, seen in dreams, felt during trance, or summoned through ritual. They often arrived during intense rites, puberty, trauma, or vision quests. Familiars were guides, but also mirrors. A raven might bring prophecy. A hare might teach shape-shifting. A wolf might reveal rage that needs taming. Some witches shape-shifted with their familiars in spirit flight. To ancient witches, familiars could travel between worlds. They warned of danger or guided spells. They were honoured with food, herbs, or song. They could be bound to tools such as a wand or bone charm. Familiars weren't chosen. They chose the witch, and sometimes they came from the ancestral line. Elemental spirits, the four keepers of the world. The elements were not mere concepts, they were living beings. The witch worked with fire, spirit of transformation, will, passion. Its elemental was the salamander, the spark within the hearth, or wildfire. Water, west, spirit of emotion, dreams, intuition. Its elemental was the undine, or nymph, found in rivers, rain, and tears. East, spirit of thought, breath, inspiration. Its elemental was the sylph, invisible but always felt in wind, whisper, and word. Earth, north, spirit of body, root, memory. Its elemental was the gnome, deep within stone, mountain, and root. The witch cast her circle by calling these spirits. She offered herbs, stones, or incense to each. She spoke to the winds, poured libations to the soil, danced before the fire, and sang over still water. Some witches married an elemental, not romantically, but ritually. They entered pacts for wisdom and power, vowing to honour their chosen spirit for life. Tree spirits and the green blood of the earth. Each tree was alive with soul. The ancient witch knew this intimately. She spoke to yew, ash, oak, and hawthorn like kin. She might ask permission before harvesting bark or leaves, sleep beneath a tree for dream visions, tie charms in branches for blessings, plant hair or blood at roots as offerings, carve sigils or runes into fallen wood for talismans. In Celtic lands, groves were temples. In Slavic lands, witches left offerings in birch forests. In Germanic lore, trees held spirits of the ancestors. Witches believed trees could protect, teach, or punish. The wrong tree, disrespected, could bring misfortune. But the right one? A lifelong guardian.
Birds, serpents, and other animal kin?
Certain animals were deeply sacred to the ancient witch, acting as messengers, symbols, or conduits of energy. Crows and ravens, carriers of prophecy, watchers between worlds. Snakes, renewal, healing, sexual power, underworld wisdom. Owls, keepers of night vision and truth. Hares, moonbound, liminal, swift travellers between worlds. Bats, reversal, dream walking, shadow guides. Community, soul messengers, connection to the divine feminine. Horses, carriers between realms, symbols of sovereignty. Witches often took on the spirit of these animals through trance, masks, or skin drumming. They did not worship them as gods, they honoured them as kin with equal agency and power.
Weather and landscape spirits. To the witch, everything had spirit.
The hill she climbed was a sleeping giant. The storm overhead was an angry spirit that needed calming. The spring she drank from was a maiden goddess with a name she knew since childhood. The fog could be a veil between realms, or a spirit trying to hide something. Witches learned to read the signs: sudden gusts, strange animal behaviour, plants that grew in odd places. They made offerings to land spirits, and in return received blessings or warnings. Some witches had land-based familiars, like a specific stone, a grove, or cave spirit they could call on in ritual. The witch as bridge between species and spirit. The ancient witch was never alone. She listened to nature, but more than that, she answered back She spoke a language older than words. She lived in harmony, not hierarchy. She asked permission, gave gratitude, and always remembered her place. Not above nature, but within it. When others cursed the wild, she sang to it. When others built walls, she walked barefoot through fields and thorns. When others forgot the old ways, she kept them alive in her bones. Ancient pagan witches, crafting the spell, words, knots, potions, and sacred making. The ancient witch was a maker, not of illusions, but of reality, not with wands of fantasy, but with thread, bone, smoke, and will. She did not separate life from magic. Her magic lived in her hearth, her voice, her hands, her breath. Every herb she picked, every knot she tied, every charm she whispered was a spell, not just cast, but woven into the fabric of the world. This was not hobby or novelty. It was survival. It was legacy. It was power, quiet, rooted, and real. Spoken spells and the power of word. Words were sacred. The witch knew that to speak was to shape. Her ancestors believed that the first thing ever created, whether by god, goddess, or void, came into being through sound. Therefore, every syllable was a spell, every breath a thread in the weaving of fate. Her spoken spells were rhymed to link intention with rhythm, chanted to build trance and power, whispered into knots, smoke, water, wind, sung to call spirits or soothe souls, breathed over herbs, charms, wounds, or fire. Some witches had secret languages, phrases only passed from mother to daughter, master to apprentice. Others used codes and riddles to hide spells from unfriendly eyes. She didn't always shout. Sometimes her spell was a breath upon the mirror, a name murmured into a flame, a single word scratched under wax. Not magic, binding, loosing, and sealing. Thread was more than fabric, it was fate. The witch used string, hair, sinew, vine, or gut to bind spells into physical form. Not magic was simple but profound. She might tie 9 knots into a red thread while chanting a wish, braid 3 herbs into a cord for healing, wrap a lover's name and hair into a thread to protect them, bind a curse or illness and bury it beneath a thorn bush, untie knots at dawn to release sorrow or free a trapped spirit. The knots held power. Cutting one could release a curse, open a path, or unleash desire. Binding one could hold love, seal protection, or lock away danger. She always tied with focus and unknotted with respect. Potions, ointments, and witch brews. Her kitchen was a laboratory of spirit and leaf. The ancient witch brewed potions not just for physical healing, but for vision, courage, fertility, sleep, love, memory, or trance. She used mugwort for dreams, valerian for peace, rose for love and grief, mandrake for spirit flight, wormwood for opening the second sight, garlic and nettle for banishing, rue and rosemary for cleansing. She crushed them in mortars made of stone, stirred clockwise with ash wood, whispered incantations as the steam rose. She believed that intention changes chemistry. She crafted ointments rubbed on the body for flying or protection. She steeped herbs in oil, wine, milk, or blood. She smoked dried bundles, used teas as offerings, and applied salves during ritual. Witches fed the sick, poisoned the cruel, nourished the dying, and opened doors to spirit, all through what she stirred in her cauldron. Sigils, inks, and hidden scripts. Writing was not common in ancient witchcraft, but when used, it was deeply magical. The witch carved runes, symbols, and sigils into wood, stone, bone, wax, or skin, doors for protection, tools for power, paper to burn or bury, jewelry to wear, poppets and charms for specific intent. She made magical ink from oak gall, wine, blood, or soot, mixed with rainwater or tears. Each stroke was a spell in form. Some witches invented their own glyphs, known only to them. Others worked with sacred alphabets, ogam, runes, or lunar scripts, believing each symbol carried cosmic energy. Poppets and sympathetic magic. The witch crafted poppets, small dolls made of cloth, straw root, beeswax, or clay. These were not toys. They were extensions of a person's spirit for healing, love, justice, or cursing. A healing poppet might be filled with herbs, anointed, sung to, and kept warm. A curse poppet might be buried in graveyard dirt, pierced with thorns, or tied with knots. A love poppet might hold hair, nail, or breath of the beloved. The witch treated poppets with care, for they worked on energetic mirrors. What was done to the poppet was done to the target. Charms and everyday magic. The ancient witch didn't always need elaborate ritual. Her daily life was layered with subtle spells, braiding hair while chanting protection, sewing sigils into clothes, hanging herb bundles over cradles or doorways, blowing wishes into dandelion seeds, drawing symbols in flour on the hearth, spitting over the left shoulder to undo a curse, carrying stones in pockets, amber for courage, moonstone for dreams, jet for mourning. The world was her spellbook, and everything she touched became a vessel for intention. Ancient Pagan Witches, Episode 7, The Hidden Ones, Survival, Persecution, and the Witch Beneath the Flames. The fires rose, the screams echoed, the word witch became a death sentence, but the true witches, the ancient ones who remembered the old ways, didn't die in the flames, they went underground. They hid in gardens, kitchens, dreams, lullabies, and old stories whispered by grandmothers. Though history tried to erase her, the witch endured, not as myth but as memory, carried in flesh. In early pagan societies, witches, or wise women, cunning folk, seers, herbwives, were respected members of the community. They healed, guided, blessed crops, eased births, and calmed the dying. But with the rise of organised religion, particularly during the early spread of Christianity, anything outside the church's control was feared. Women with knowledge of herbs, of cycles, of nature spirits, of ritual became targets. In Europe, particularly between the 13th and 18th centuries, the witch trials exploded. Fear was stoked by politics, plague, famine, and patriarchy. Women, especially those who were elderly, unmarried, midwives or healers, poor or outspoken, childless or too fertile, dreamers, dancers, or singers of old songs, were accused of witchcraft, tortured, drowned, or burned. Entire villages were emptied of their wise women. But not all witches were caught. The hedge witch and the hearth witch, hidden in plain sight. The hedge witch lived on the fringes, both socially and spiritually. She walked the hedge between worlds. She was part of the village, yet set apart. Her home smelled of wild herbs, smoke and loam. She hid her rituals inside gardening. She whispered her spells while stirring broth. She tied knots of protection in her children's shoelaces. She knew when to be silent, when to bow, and when to let them think she was just a midwife or herbalist. The hearth witch did the same, casting circles around her fire with a broom, singing to the bread dough, feeding her family with enchanted meals. To the untrained eye, she was just a mother. But every action was magic. These witches passed on their wisdom in secret, in lullabies that were actually protection chants, in embroidery that hid sigils, in herb gardens that grew in spiral patterns, in fairy tales that held warnings and hidden rites. They didn't need grimoires. Their body remembered.
The grandmother line.
Blood memory and matrilineal magic. Even in times of silence, the witch was kept alive in the body and bones of daughters. Grandmothers taught granddaughters to listen to dreams, plant garlic at the doorstep, burn bay leaves to call in the future, throw salt over the shoulder, use vinegar, rosemary and smoke to cleanse the home, wear red on the hips for protection, fear not their blood, but honour it. These weren't explained as magic. They were just the way things were until the granddaughter began to remember. The burning times, what was lost and what lived on. The witch trials were not myth. They were real. Tens of thousands, mostly women, were tortured and killed. But here's what didn't die. The herbs still grow, the moon still waxes, the songs still echo in dreams, the spirits never stop listening, the blood still carries memory. The land still remembers the footfalls of its priestesses. The ancient witch hid in the folds of the world. She became the wise aunt, the old woman who talks to birds, the girl who hears voices in the trees, the midwife who touches with more than hands, the mother who blesses her child with a kiss on the forehead, and a whisper no one else hears. The witch reborn, awakening after the silence. Now she rises again, in you, in me, in everyone who remembers without being taught, in those who speak to plants, cry under full moons, stir their tea clockwise and know why. The witch was never truly burned. She went underground into the roots. And now she is blooming again. Episode 8, Blood, Birth and the Sacred Body, Rites of Womanhood and Witchcraft. To the ancient witch, the body was holy ground. It bled without wound. It made life from seed and breath. It healed, birthed, died and transformed. It knew things the mind could never name. The body was not sinful. It was a temple, a compass, a cauldron. Its curves held the waxing moon. Its scars whispered stories of survival. Its rhythms followed the tides, and its blood was an offering, not a curse. This episode is about how witches, especially women, honoured the sacred in their own skin. Menstruation as magic, not misery. In patriarchal times, menstruation was silenced, hidden, or considered impure. But in ancient witchcraft, menstrual blood was sacred. It was known as the wise blood or blood of the moon. It was the witch's most personal elixir, potent with power, life, memory, and spirit. Witches would offer blood to the earth or sacred trees as fertility rites or thanks, use blood in spell work, particularly spells of protection, love, and power, anoint sacred objects with blood to bind personal energy into them, collect blood in moon water for divination or healing baths. Keep a moon journal, tracking dreams, emotions, and visions through their cycle. The first bleed menarche was celebrated. A red ribbon was tied to the wrist. A ritual bath or herbal tea was given. The girl became part of the circle of women. Blood was never seen as weakness. It was evidence of the body's magic, of the womb of oath, gate, and chalice. Rites of passage, maiden, mother, crone. The ancient witch walked through life in cycles, not straight lines. Each phase brought new power, new responsibility, and new rites. One maiden, the wild, untamed beginning, associated with new moons, spring and air. She was taught to dream, dance, sing to the trees, and trust her instincts. 2. Mother, literal or symbolic, the creator, nurturer, and protector, associated with full moons, summer, and fire. She learned to hold space, cast circles, and protect the home and land. 3. Crone, the wise one, death walker, teacher, associated with waning moons, winter, and earth. She remembered all. She guided others. She held the ancestral flame. Transitions were marked with rituals, burying a lock of hair under the full moon, sharing stories by fire, carving one's name into sacred wood or stone, ritual baths, herbal smoke, painted symbols on the skin. Every age was sacred. Sacred sexuality. The body as altar. The witch did not believe sexuality belonged to men, gods, or shame. It belonged to her. Her desire was divine. Her pleasure was a spell. Her orgasm was a portal, a moment when spirit and body danced as one. She used her body for sex magic, building energy through arousal and directing it into spells. Ritual lovemaking, especially during Beltane, the festival of fertility and fire. Healing trauma through gentle self-touch, chanting, mirror work, or sacred bathing. Womb blessings, placing hands over the belly, singing to her own center, or sharing this rite with others. She saw her body as an instrument of both spirit and sensation. She was never just a vessel, she was a sacred flame. The power in scars. Pain as transformation. The witch did not hide her scars. She marked them with ash, painted over them with ochre or blood, or traced them in moonlight. She knew scars were stories made flesh. Pain was a threshold to deeper wisdom. The body held imprints of all initiations, not just birth, but grief, betrayal, survival, healing. Witches performed rites of self-forgiveness, of body reclaiming, especially after violence, childbirth, or illness. They whispered over their wounds, "You are not broken, you are reforged. You are not less, you are more." The female body was never weak to them. It was the portal of all creation, the mirror of the moon, and the map of sacred cycles. Daily rites of body reverence. Witches honoured their bodies in simple, sacred ways, anointing with oils under the waxing moon, bathing in herbs on solstice mornings, dancing bare feet to awaken the root chakra, massaging the womb with castor oil and prayer, gazing at their own body in candlelight, naming each part with kindness, weaving red threads into waistbands or hair as protective sigils. Every act of care was an act of worship. Every gesture said, "My body is not property. My body is not shame. My body is sacred." Ancient Pagan Witches. Episode 9, The Witch's Year, Sabbats, Offerings, and Sacred Timing. The ancient witch did not measure time by clocks or calendars. She measured it by the scent of the soil, the angle of sunlight, the call of birds returning, and the whisper in the roots. Her year turned with 8 sacred festivals, each a doorway, each a heartbeat in the great spiral of life. Through them she lived, died, and was reborn again and again. This was not just seasonal observation, this was cosmic alignment. The witch's body, spirit, and land moved together. The Wheel of the Year, 8 spokes, 4 solar festivals, 4 cross-quarter fire feasts. Let us walk them together.
Samhain,
October 31st, November 1. The Witch's New Year's, the last harvest, fields lie fallow, spirits roam, ancestors visit, the year dies to begin again. Witches held silent feasts, left food for the dead, lit black and white candles, and performed ancestral rites. It was a time of divination, shadow work, and honouring loss. Offerings: apples, bones, pomegranate seeds, graveyard soil, rosemary. Tools: black candles, ancestral photos, cauldrons, obsidian. Yule, winter solstice, December 21. The longest night, the sun is reborn. Light returns barely, hope flickers. Trees are honoured, fires lit. The crone gives way to the child of light. Witches kindled Yule logs, burned herbs for cleansing, and called in dreams and visions. They practiced prophecy, rest, and womb magic. Offerings: cinnamon, pine, dried orange, clove, red ribbon. Tools: evergreen branches, bells, golden apples, mulled wine. Imbolc, Feb 1st to 2. The first light, seeds stir in the darkness. Snow melts, lambs are born. Brigid, goddess of fire and healing, is honoured. Initiations take place. Witches blessed homes with milk, fire, and spring water. They made Brigid's crosses, anointed tools, and dedicated new paths. Offerings: milk, white flowers, candle wax, snow water. Tools: fire bowls, wands, poetry, white cloth.
Ostara,
Spring equinox, March 20. Balance, bloom, resurrection. Light and dark are equal. Seeds break soil, hares leap. Egg magic and fertility rites flourish. Witches dyed eggs with herbs, planted intention seeds, and cleansed the home with birch, vinegar, and breath. They honoured rebirth and inner balance. Offerings: painted eggs, crocus, dandelion wine, honey. Tools: flower crowns, pastel ribbons, quartz, early greens.
Beltane, May 1.
Fire and flesh, fertility and union. Flowers bloom wild, cattle are driven through smoke. Lovers leap fires, maypoles rise. The veil thins again, but with pleasure, not grief. Witches celebrated sacred sexuality, danced barefoot, made green man masks, and bathed in morning dew. It was a feast of pleasure, passion, and planting desire. Offerings: hawthorn blossoms, honey cakes, ash, nettle. Tools: maypole, fire torches, red thread, antlers. Litha, summer solstice, June 20, the longest day. The sun is king. Crops ripen, bees hum, protection rituals, and herb gathering peak. Magic is loud, bold, and alive. Witches jumped over fires, gathered herbs at dawn, and charged crystals and water in the sunlight. They made amulets and protection pouches. Offerings: St. John's wort, sunflower, oak leaves, mead. Tools: mirrors, golden bowls, sun-charged oils, copper.
Lammas, Lugnasa,
The first harvest, gratitude and offering. Grain is cut, bread is baked. Time of sacrifice and celebration. Honour the dying god, life feeding life. Witches baked bread with intent, created corn dollies, and hosted community feasts. They offered the first fruits of labour back to the land. Offerings: fresh bread, barley, wheat, fire ashes. Tools: scythes, woven dolls, braided corn, gold ribbon. Mabon, autumn equinox, September 21. Balance returns, the descent begins. Light and dark equal once more. Second harvest, preparation for winter. Time of reflection, memory, and balance. Witches made wine-dried herbs and cleansed tools for storage. They performed rituals of gratitude, forgiveness, and release. Offerings: wine, grapes, apples, leaves, soil from the garden. Tools: scales, balance charms, blackberries, altars with both white and black. Timing and the sacred rhythm. The witch also timed her workings with the moon, waxing for growth, full for power, waning for banishing, dark for descent. The sun, dawn for beginnings, noon for power, sunset for endings, midnight for spirit work. The tides for coastal witches. Her own blood cycle, bleeding for release and vision, ovulation for fertility and manifestation. She lived in sync with the earth, not in spite of it. Ancient Pagan Witches, Episode 10, The Witch's Tools. Cauldron, wand, mirror and bone. The ancient witch did not collect tools for show. Each one was chosen, fed and awakened. They were not dead objects, but spirit-bound allies. She spoke to them, named them, hid them in plain sight, and when she used them she did so with care and intent, knowing they held centuries of energy and ancestral fire. Let us explore the most sacred of her instruments. Saddle 1. The wand staff. Channel of will and spirit. The wand was not a toy, nor always a polished stick. It was the extension of the witch's will, used to direct energy, open circles, and call down power. Some witches used just a small wand carved from sacred trees. Hazel for wisdom and air, rowan for protection and fire, willow for dream and water, yew for the dead and earth. Others walked with a staff, taller, adorned with feathers, bone or bells, a travelling altar and companion spirit. The staff was used to trace runes, call storms, part energy fields, or anchor the witch during trance. The wand was touched to the forehead, heart and womb before major workings.
2.
The knife, blade of separation and power. Atham was the witch's ritual blade, not used to cut herbs or flesh, but cut through energy, cast circles, and draw sigils in smoke or air. It was often black-handled, double-edged, representing duality, life, death, shadow, light, used only in sacred space. In some traditions, the bowline, a curved white-handled knife, was used for harvest and physical cutting, like herbs or cords. The knife was seen as a truth-teller. It revealed, severed and protected.
The 3.
The mirror, gate to the other world. The mirror was more than vanity. It was a portal. The ancient witch used polished obsidian, still water in bowls, or black glass to gaze beyond, into spirit realms, into the self, into time. Through scrying, she might speak with ancestors, see future paths, find lost things or souls, retrieve dream fragments, uncover shadow truths. Before scrying, she anointed the mirror with oil or smoke and lit a single candle behind her to cast shadow and reveal hidden light. 4. The cauldron, womb of creation and destruction. The cauldron was not just a pot, it was the womb of the goddess. It held life and death, bone, fire and water. Witches used the cauldron to brew potions, burn offerings or intentions, hold water for scrying, symbolize the void from which all magic is born. It was often placed in the west on the altar, the direction of water, dreams and spirit. To stir the cauldron was to stir fate. 5. The broom, besom, sweeper of boundaries. The broom was both mundane and magical. It swept not dirt, but energy. Witches used it to cleanse ritual space, jump over it to seal or start unions, such as in hand fastings, lay it across the threshold to ward off spirits, place it upside down behind the door to keep away unwanted guests. It was usually made of birch handle, ash, shaft, and willow binding, each with symbolic properties. Some witches kept a dream broom under their bed to fly in dreams. 6. The cord. Weaver of spells. The witch's cord was often red, black or white. She used it to tie knots of power or protection, measure a circle, wrap around her waist or tools as a sacred bond, create knot spells as in episode 6, to store or release energy. She might carry a wish-bead, a cord tied with feathers, beads or bones, each one a wish or spell, and spone, skull and tooth. Vessels of memory and spirit. The witch saw bones as vibrating with essence. She used skulls for ancestral communication, animal bones for divination, bone throwing, teeth in charms for endurance or cunning, bird bones in flight rituals. Each bone was cleaned, blessed, and sometimes painted with symbols. To possess a bone was to carry part of its story. She always asked permission before taking bone from land or beast. 8. Charms and amulets. Spirit-bound companions. The witch created or carried poppets for sympathetic magic, herb bundles for healing or warding, stone talismans wrapped in thread, clay tokens engraved with runes, hair braids tied into rings or cords. Each was awakened with breath, oil or flame, and often fed during ritual to keep it alive. They were not decoration, they were servants of the spell. 9. The witch's pouch. Her portable world. Witches carried small pouches filled with a pinch of salt or graveyard dirt, feathers, seeds, small crystals, thorn, thread, tiny bottle of herbs, a nail, a coin, a folded sigil, something from their familiar spirit. This pouch was a living altar, tucked beneath key clothes or hung by the bed. It smelled of smoke, moss, and mystery. Each tool a bond. Tools weren't just used, they were befriended. Before being used, each was named, consecrated with the 4 elements, spoken to, often in private, stored in special cloth or boxes, kept on the altar or hidden in earth or hearth. A witch never borrowed tools lightly, they were extensions of the soul. She never really left, not when the fires burned, not when her name was mocked. Not when the herbs were labelled poison or the moon was called superstition. The ancient witch simply went quiet, hiding in bone, seed, and song, until the day came when she could rise again. That day is now, and you are her voice. The blood knows inheritance beyond books. You do not need a lineage to be a witch. You do not need a title or a teacher. If your blood stirs under moonlight, if your fingers itch when you touch the soil, if old trees make you weep and bones whisper your name, then you carry her inside you. The witch was never just someone from a story. She is a force inside the remembering. In the way you know when someone is lying. In the dream you had that later came true. In the candle you light with no one watching. In the ache you feel when you walk by ruins or ancient oak. In the rage that rises when freedom is taken from women or earth. In the comfort you find in herbs, stones, or feathers. You don't need proof. You are the proof. Witchcraft today, rewilding, reclaiming, returning. Modern witches are not reenactors. They are reclaimers. They reach into the roots and pull out the old power and reshape it with modern hands. We grow herbs in apartments and offer wine to the moon on balconies. We draw sigils on our skin before interviews or rituals. We speak aloud to trees, light candles to Hecate, and stir our tea with spells. We walk barefoot when we can, and when we can't, we walk with memory. We wear protection stones, carry pouches in purses, chant before sleep. We bleed without shame, love without permission, and refuse to forget. Witchcraft is no longer hidden, but it is still sacred. It is not trendy, it is ancestral. It is not evil, it is the birthright of the wise and the wild. Cycles continue, the wheel turns within you. The Sabbats still turn, the moon still waxes and wanes, your soul still craves rhythm, ritual, and remembrance. Each time you breathe with intention, light a candle and say a name, mix herbs with purpose, listen to dreams, whisper over water, place your hand on your womb and say, you are holy, you keep the old ways alive. You are not playing witch. You are awakening what was buried. You are the spell. You don't need anyone's permission to walk this path. You don't need a perfect altar, 100 books, or a bloodline. What you need is reverence, intuition, practice, courage, and the ancient witch casts spells with breath, stone, blood, and earth. So can you. You don't need to become her. You already are. A final whisper from her to you. You are the one I waited for. You are the spark in the ashes. You are the breath in the bone, the root in the frost, the echo of all who dared to live free. Take up my mantle, rewrite my name, remember me, and in doing so, remember yourself.